The doctors aren't giving the education either because we're educated by big pharma, and that's the truth of it. I mean, they have their hooks in all the medical institutions all across the world, in the residency or resident programs and the post residency education with with drug reps going to the hospitals and educating doctors by talking about cherry picked studies from their company pushing their product, and then going to
Yeah.
conferences that do the same thing. They're funded by the, big food and big pharma. And you can bet your ass that like no one's giving a talk there that goes against anything that goes against their bottom line. And the thing is too is that patients, I talk to them every day because this is my whole practice. There's people that are fed up with the same old advice and the same old system. It's not working. It's not helping because doctors going to say like, "Wow, I can tell them about diet and lifestyle," but what are you telling about diet and lifestyle? You're saying eat
Mm.
less, move more. That's it. And you're saying, oh, stay away from fat. Fat makes you fat and all that sort of bullshit. So, yeah, I have no doubt that that doesn't help because the thing is that they think, and I've spoken to a lot of doctors about this, and they say, overweight doctors, by the way, who
Yeah.
say, well, the reason that patients are so fat and sick is because they just don't listen to doctors. And it's like, no, the problem is they did listen to doctors. And the bottom of it, the advice was bad. They're saying eat less, move more, eat less meat, eat less fat, eat more healthy fruits, whole grains, and all that sort of garbage. And it doesn't work. And so they go home and they're getting fatter, they're getting sicker, and they're like, no one listens. No one listens. I told them what to do and they didn't do it,
Yeah. Well,
but they did
I
do it.
think, I think they think that the science is settled, like they say,
Mm,
settled science and all that. I'm thinking, whenever you hear anybody say,
no such thing. Yeah.
the settled science, just know that what you're
Yeah.
about to hear is about as truthful as the COVID jab is safe and effective for everyone, and it
Mm,
totally stops transmission.
yeah.
We know what a
Yeah.
bunch of bullshit that was, right? So, I think they get these certain conclusions, so to speak, in their minds, and that okay, so it's you have to eat low fat, high carbs, the grains. That's what we got to do because Jesus ate the grains, and that was, but they don't know the
Mhm.
whole history of the grains, which you know, they don't know
Mhm.
that wheat raises the blood sugar higher than a Snickers bar.
Mhm.
Wheat. I never knew that. I see. I
Mhm.
this all this stuff blew my mind. Right. I didn't know, and I very early on in the book, in fact, page 2 of the of chapter 1, I explain. I say, look, you have to understand the two most fundamental players in the processing of the food that you put in your mouth, and that's glucose, also known as blood sugar, and insulin. You eat something, your glucose goes up. The pancreas senses that, and it secretes some insulin to bring it down, keep it in a normal range. And that's a normal process that goes on through life. But when you're eating the wrong foods hour after hour, day after day, week after week, and your insulin and your blood glucose stays elevated, you're going to develop insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia. Hyperinsulinemia, that's just a fancy technical term for hyper, too much insulin. Emia means in the blood. That's for your audience. Hyperinsulinemia. And then comes your prediabetes and type 2 diabetes and all the inflammation. And then what happens is that inflammation then goes through your arterial system, your cardiovascular system, and then turns on whatever you've got lurking in your genetics that mom and dad
Mhm.
had and that grandpa and grandpa had. And it turns it all that on. That's why it's so clearly what I've called a gateway disease. That's what turns it all on. This
Mhm.
and we've never had that throughout history, right?
Mhm. Yeah. No, definitely not. So I was going to ask you as well. I mean, you call us the unholy trinity. So, why is that? Do these things work synergistically together to screw us up, or are they just all bad and we see them together a lot?
They're individually bad. And then if
Mhm.
you look at the list of things, in fact, I got a great quote from Nina Teicholz in there about how in her out of her book, her book was this classic 2014 Big Fat Surprise: Why Butter, Meat, and Cheese Belong in a Healthy Diet. And she was the one that was at the forefront, her and Dr. Chris Kenobi and Dr. Kate Shanahan, that showed like it's not the fat. The fat is good for you. It's what
Hmm.
we've eaten for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. Proven by these, like I said before, anthropologists and bioarchaeologists. They've proven, I think it's a lot longer than this, but they say it's at least 2.6 to 4.5 million. And, there's this thing, as you know, they're called the species adaptation hypothesis. And that's basically says that when a certain species is used to eating a certain way for a long damn time, that becomes their healthy diet. Just like the cows
Yeah.
eating the grass and the goats and so forth. Um, and our healthy diet was animals, what we could catch,
Yeah.
kill, and eat. And of course, other things when we were, and they use grains as fallback food.
Yeah.
Again, the anthropologist and bioarchaeologist. I have a picture of a guy in chapter 10. It's called "Are You a Wheat Addict?" And there's this guy. Well, his skull. It's from 100,000 years ago, and he's got perfect teeth. And I asked, "Well, you think you had an orthodontist floss twice a day and all this?" No. And what they did was after they started eating wheat and grains, see what they found that clever humans discovered that if they could grind up the seeds from the grains, because that's where the grains come from, the seeds, not from the stalks or anything, and they added some water, heated it up, they could make something like a porridge, and that allowed them to survive an extra day, week, month. But they took a serious toll
Mm.
on their physiology and everything. They tooth decay, missing teeth because they started exhuming bodies from after that point of 10,000
Hmm.
years ago, 9,000 years ago or so. That's when agricultural societies came in. And and they could see that all these new diseases, I mean, not as bad as the last 100 years,
Yeah.
but bone diameter and length shrunk. Men shrunk 5 inches, women shrunk 3 inches. I mean, it was just a disaster. And
Hmm.
then in the late 60s, early 70s, big ag came along, and it's always grown to shoulder height, right? They came up with this thing called chemical mutagenesis and radiation mutagenesis, and that shrunk it down to 18 inches. They call it semi-dwarf wheat. And what that does is they get bigger seeds, and that gives them a more bountiful crop. That's why they did
Hmm.
that. But what it does is it amps up this protein from gluten called gliadin, Gliadin, gliadin. And what does that do? That attaches to the opiate receptors of the brain. I mean, it doesn't, like, again, it doesn't get you high or relieve pain, but it turns on the same opiate receptors as morphine and heroin. And its expression is to make you crave more of the things that have wheat and grains in them. Like, that's why, check out this stat. The average supermarket has 60,000 products. 59,000 contain wheat or some form of
Mm.
wheat. I have
Wow.
all the aliases in there too to look out for in chapter 10. Even Twizzlers, the candy, the second ingredient is wheat. It's like, what? They're really
Yeah.
coming after our opiate
That would be
receptors. And so
plastic.
it's
Yeah.
just it's that money thing again, right?
Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys. Well, it is, and it's they make a lot of money, and there's a big markup. And just like the statins, that's been the highest grossing drug that's been on the market. And so, I mean, you're gonna have to pry that out of their cold dead fingers. They're not going to give that up. They're not going to give up. Now the statins are off patent. They don't really care as much anymore. But now you got the PCSK9 inhibitors, and so these really dramatically drop your serum cholesterol. And so I've spoken to cardiologists about this, and they were saying that now the drug reps are really pushing for the PCSK9 inhibitors. They're not even pushing for the statins anymore because they want the new on-patent drugs for people to use because they make more money on that. And so because they drop things so much, they are now pushing to lower the cholesterol threshold again. And
Oh my
so,
God.
yeah, and so it's
Oh
just
my
like
God.
even lower, even lower, even lower. And this what does this do? This qualifies more people to be on more aggressive drugs. And so because they just want more money, and this is
Yeah,
this
that's
is
what a
clearly
doctor
causing
was
harm.
telling me that in 1950, I think the cholesterol, normal cholesterol was below 300. Now
Yeah,
it's below 200, and now they're going to lower it again, like you're saying. Oh my God,
yeah,
that's what's really going to. Oh, it's
yeah,
just horrible. Wow.
yeah, yeah. Well, and same with blood pressure. It used to be under 140 was normal, then under 130, now under 120. And I've spoken to some people, and they're starting to hear people talking, come reps, oh, we really should get it under 110. And it's just like because you're going to bring in tens of millions of more people that now qualify for these drugs. Have some 117 over 70. Ooh, I don't really like that. Oh, we need to get you on some blood pressure meds. And yeah, and it's just a way to sell more drugs. I mean, this is a drug cartel. They're the biggest drug
uh,
cartels in the world because they're actually legal. This is the opium trade. Back in the day, I mean, people made empires off the opium trade. I mean, they bought islands and nations based on that. And now this is the same thing. It's a legal drug trade. It's a legal drug cartel. They're selling drugs. Some of these things have legitimate uses and really do save people's lives. Others don't. And their motivations are not to help people. Their motivations are to make money. And so they want to make as much money as they can. Well, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. Well, you actually first and foremost have a responsibility to these patients. You do not get to cause harm in order to make money. So okay, so if I have a team of people and like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to go and try to make as much money as we can. And you can buy shares in our company, this, that, and the other. And what we do is we hire a bunch of black ops people to knock over banks and we rob banks. And if we have to shoot people and kill people because that gets us in and out fast enough, and then we can make more money, I have a fiduciary responsibility to shoot out those people because my shareholders need more money. It's just like, no, 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 dickhead. You don't get to hurt people in order to do that. You have to
uh,
first make a product that is a good product and not cause harm. If you're knowingly causing harm, if you're knowingly putting somebody on a drug that, I mean, if that's the only option, then fine, but intentionally stifling innovation that can actually cure disease because it affects your bottom line, or putting out false information and lying and paying people to put out studies to say that your product is a really good idea, or that cholesterol is really bad and we need to treat it, knowing that it's causing harm, knowing that it's wrong. That's criminal behavior. And just like any sort of war criminal and somebody make human rights violators, you should be in prison. I mean, some of these things are like bordering Nuremberg sort of level
yeah.
criminality. You know that your product is causing harm. Like, I mean, the tobacco companies, they knew that their product was causing harm for 30 years, and
Right.
yet they lied and put out studies saying that it didn't, and it was actually good for you, or at least didn't cause harm. And then we know that they're lying, so they got fined $400 billion. Okay,
That was
that's a lot of money.
1994. That was
Yeah,
1994. They brought him
yeah,
before Congress. Oh
mhm,
no, Mr. Congressman, we never intentionally
mhm,
put addicting carcinogenic
yeah.
material chemicals in our products.
Yeah, but they
Uh,
did, and we know that now. And what happened? Did they go to prison? Because did they go to prison for the mass murder of
no.
hundreds of millions of people around the world? No. And
No,
until
now
they
they
do,
own
this shit's
Kraft
going to
and
continue.
Nabisco and General Foods.
Mhm.
Now that's how they're getting people eliminated, So
That's
it's
it.
just it really
Yeah,
I think people have a low confront of um the ability to confront evil. It's
yeah,
not a high ability in most people. They just, oh no, they wouldn't do that.
yeah,
No, my Uncle Joe
yeah,
works for them. That couldn't be. And
yeah.
it's just, but there's
Um,
that old
yeah.
saying from what was it? I love this guy, Mark Twain. The
Yeah,
common sense philosopher from the 1800s, and he
yeah,
said
he's great.
it's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. It's
Yeah.
easier to fool people than to convince them, hey, you've been fooled, pal.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
definitely.
just wild. It's just wild.
Yeah. Well, people say, oh, they wouldn't do that. It's like, I'm sure people thought that in Nazi Germany as well. And
Oh,
guess what? They were doing these things and they're still doing these things. I mean, there are horrible, evil things going on around the world right now, but we live in such a protected environment that we think that microaggressions are the worst thing that ever happened to human, civilization. It's just like try going to an actual war-torn country or a place where there are actual genocides happening right now. They are still happening. We just don't hear about them. But there are genocides happening. I went and helped with the survivors of genocide in Burma in 2017,
I read
2018.
about that. I read that you
And
did that. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and when I was there, I was working with a lot of people that did this as a profession. They went from disaster to disaster to disaster. And the amount of horrors that I heard that were going on in the world right now that I had never heard of. And I watch the news. You try to stay informed. That's the Mark Twain quote again. If you don't read the news, then you're uninformed. If you do read the news, you're misinformed. And so,
Exactly.
and that was it. And you just don't see this stuff. And I was like, how the hell did I miss this? How the hell did I miss this massive genocide? And I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find it anywhere being reported on. And then when I went there, there were just countless of these things all over the world going on at any given time. We just don't hear about them. We just live
Yeah.
in this little bubble.
Yeah.
And that's
Thank you
and
for
I
doing that. And thank you for staying with the whole purpose of enlightening people about from your experience and all the wisdom that you have. And again, you're a clinician. You actually see patients and, it's not anywhere near what I do. I've
mm,
just been a researcher to solve my own problem. But thank you for getting all this information out there and having people like myself on so that we can spread the word about metabolic health.
you're very welcome. Well, I'm glad that you're doing this. I'm glad that more people are coming to this. I'm sorry that you had to have a heart attack before it came to your attention. But that's the thing, you were like you said, you were Mr. Healthy. You were doing all the healthy things, right? So you're the doctor you were mentioning before was saying, just you can't speak to some people, they just don't listen. They do, and you're living proof of that. You did listen. You did all the things that doctor would have recommended to people, and it cost you. Whereas when I talk to people and I say, and I paint out, a similar picture that you paint out in your book, and I say, look, these things cause harm, and here's how, and this is why you want to avoid them. They get it, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to eat that crap. And so then they start doing it, and then it works, and then they get
Mm.
benefits. It's not that they change your diet. Oh, look at your blood marker. Oh, your cholesterol went down. Yay. Well, how do you feel? Okay, they feel like crap, then their other
Uh.
markers are getting worse and things. Oh, but my cholesterol went down. Hmm. You know,
I
and
know it's just we have a lot of work to do to wake people up. And that's why,
yeah,
I wrote the book. I'm told I'm pretty good at explaining things, complicated science in an easy to understand way. Because I always listen to Einstein would say, if you can't explain something complicated to a fourth grader, then you don't
mm,
really understand it that well yourself, right? And so I
yeah,
really
good
had to
point.
make sure that I understood what all this meant and what it was and how it related to me. And that's how I was able to get myself better and then be able to explain it in a way that I give analogies and that kind of thing. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that the book is written from the viewpoint of one of the victims of false data and fake science foisted upon the populations and the doctors for
Mhm.
70 years. And so, you have to get this information. And I've written it for the average reader of health and wellness. It's not written for doctors or scientists, even though they need it
Mm.
more, but it's written for the average person to go, hey, I have that in my family. Maybe I should look into this. And that's basically what I did there. So, that I'm on the same mission as you, so I'm so glad to hear that you'd like to come join us on this the thing we spoke about earlier before we the Maha thing. RFK has this Maha, Make
Yeah,
America Healthy
absolutely.
Again, and for your audience, Eric Berg had reached out to me to join that because he was invited onto that, And he wanted me to ask you if you'd like to
Mhm.
join us to get the word out more about metabolic
Definitely.
health. We're going to go after the dietary guidelines with Nina Teicholz and others that are on the team that you know. So I'm glad you're accepting that challenge
Sure.
or that because he'll give us all his secrets of how to make a video go viral and all that
Mhm.
kind of thing. So and he's been doing it since YouTube started. I think it was
Mhm.
2007 or something. I don't know, but
Yeah, well.
and you're way beyond me than that. You got what, 500,000 subscribers? Holy
Mhm.
moly. I'm way behind that, but at least I have the book to get things out that
Yeah,
way.
definitely. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor at Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. Well, I think I think it's great that you're involved with that, and I definitely am interested in that. I think that's another thing too. With this Maha movement, we need to especially with RFK's background in litigation, starting to actually prosecute these guys criminally. I mean, there's there's an actual criminal. If they are knowingly putting out harmful products and lying about and putting out misinformation knowingly, like the tobacco companies have, like the sugar companies have, and we know they have because we have their documentation saying they did it. They should be prosecuted criminally. Wow, that was 50 years ago, and all those people are gone now. But you continued it, didn't you, dickhead? And you knew about that. And so
Yeah,
if you're continuing to profit off of that, then obviously you're going to still be. But no, but they're the ones who lie. Yeah, but then you continued it. You're still putting out a harmful product. You're still harming people with that product, and you're doing it knowingly.
it's
So,
true.
I think.
I was watching his confirmation hearings and he was saying something like, I've sued these companies. And when you do that, you get a PhD because there's
Mm,
discovery, right? You get a PhD on how they operate and between the government agencies and the big food companies and that kind of thing. And you see the corruption. It's crystal clear. So I'm so glad that he's
yeah.
it's interesting. Related to that, the end of my chapter 7, Nina Teicholz, speaking of her and her, she started this lobbying group called Nutrition Coalition, and her group and another, they did this study where there was an investigative study into the committee members of the U.S. dietary guidelines because they have them every 5 years. Right now, we're in the 2020 to 2025. And they discovered that 95% of the committee members, 19 out of 20, had COI,
Oh,
conflicts of interest, and were receiving financial backing, also known as bribes, from big food and big, Kraft and General Foods and Mead Johnson and these pharma companies. It's just, that people need to become aware of that because we want to change. They just will not accept anything having to do with low carb, keto, that kind of thing. And that's why we're really going to attack that because, as you know, the U.S. dietary guidelines, that's what guides that's in all the prisons, in the schools, in the, elderly homes. And it's just all across the boards and it's causing so much damage to people. And so
yeah.
you know, I'll introduce you to Eric over email. How's that?
That'd be great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be respectful of your time, but I also wanted to just get one more question in if you had time.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned the most important labs, a chapter on most important labs, and you mentioned a couple of them. But what would be some of the things that people could, as a take home? What are some of the things that people should check that they're not checking?
Well, the very first one you want to get because you may be one of the many, many people that have normal fasting glucose and normal A1C, but still be a raging type 2 diabetic and not know it. You need to get the OGTT with insulin or just the OGTT. That's oral glucose tolerance test with insulin. Um, that's the first one. You want to find out if you've got what level of diabetic physiology you have. If you got a belly, you're already there. You
Mm.
just need to verify it, no matter what your A1C says or your fasting blood glucose, because those can be normal and you're still, full type 2 diabetic. So get that one. And there was a couple other inflammation markers. Just go to my website,
Mm.
danieltrevor.com, click on blood tests, and I got a whole page with
Mm.
the top 4 or 5 most important ones that I would get. There's a male panel and a female panel. And there's one that also that I should mention with regard to the fatty liver disease that I had, that I discovered all this information from Ivor Cummins. You know Ivor, right?
Mm.
And he had what I had. He had this fatty liver disease because, see, what the deal is there's most doctors, they don't check what's called GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase. It's a liver enzyme. Most of them, if they check anything, they'll check ALP, AST, ALT, right? They don't check the GGT, the gamma glutamyl transferase. Why is that important? Life insurance companies have to know who to accept and who to reject. And life insurance companies are damn good at analyzing data and statistics since the 1600s, when they would insure boats that would go out into the ocean and all that. I mean,
Mm.
they're really damn good at it. That's why they're most successful companies on the planet, right?
Mm.
So anyway, they discovered that their number one predictor of all-cause mortality is having elevated GGT, gamma
Mm.
glutamyl transferase. It's like, who know? Why doesn't the medical community know what the life insurance companies? Would you guys talk to each other, maybe?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, and then, it's just amazing that is just. And then the more I looked into it, I found studies showing that if you have elevated GGT, the usual cause of death is a heart attack.
Mm.
And there I was. So I was, the whole time I'm connecting dots and that kind of thing. So that's another one. But that's part of the male panel or the female panel. You want to make sure that it has GGT in there. Of course, there's the um, you want to get your HDL to triglycerides ratio, because that will tell if you've got small dense LDL particles as well. And it's about, I think it's 6 to 9 times more predictive of cardiovascular disease than an LDL test.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's danieltrevor.com. And at there, I have a short 7-minute video at the top of the page. It tells my story and some of the creepy statistics that you've heard here a little bit with us. And I love discussing all this thing. If we can get people to hear this information and not be so, to at least inspire them to start to think, oh, maybe I should start to avoid eating this, that, and the other. And if we can get them going in that direction, and that's what we want to do, right?
Very good. Absolutely. Well, the book is called The Unholy Trinity by Daniel Trevor. It is out now and available everywhere. And I encourage everyone to go to his website as well and see all the resources there. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Can you please tell people where exactly they can find you? Obviously, your website, etc., but any other sort of social media sites?
Yeah, no, it's basically just danieltrevor.com, and you can find me elsewhere from there. But, that's where you
Mm.
get all the information. I have a lot of really good data there. And, videos. I'll put this one up there, the one that we do. And that kind and they can sign up. They can get a free preview of the book. And what that is they put in their name and their email address. They can unsubscribe at any time. I send out a weekly newsletter every weekend, Friday, Saturday, that kind of thing. It's got some really good data. A lot of it is from the book, a lot of it's news and that kind of thing. But they sign up, and they get the first 48 pages for free. It's a PDF. Sign up, get that there. And then again, you can, I'm not selling anything. You can I'm a strong believer in, you taste it a little bit. And if you like the way it tastes, then you can go buy the book. 1865, I think.
Mm.
And it looked like lard, which people used to cook with. And they
Mm.
thought, hey, let's sell it to people, make some money. And so Crisco, they invented this, started flying off the shelves in 1911. And oh my God. And it turns out that